this grave here, third grave out from the wall. Now, son Michael actually immigrated to Australia in 1879, where he had a brother, Daniel, already settled in a place called Colac, Victoria. Michael married Elizabeth Sharp, and they had 10 children, one of whom was son John, born in 1888, on the 18th of February 1916. At the age of 27 years and 8 months, John Kinane enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Colac. He was assigned regimental number 2225 and transferred to the 45th Battalion. John's Army Service records that he departed Sydney on board the SS Wiltshire on the 22nd of August 1916 and arrived in Plymouth on the 13th of October 1916. On the 2nd of January 1917, he left Folkestone on board the Princess Henrietta and was bound for France. John was on the battlefields in France from the 3rd of February 1917 when he was medically evacuated to England, suffering from trench feet, which was the curse of infantry soldiers operating in France at the time. It was contracted from more or less standing permanently in wet mud and water, which said the trenches were absolutely putrid with. He was granted furlough in England in April of 1917 and then returned to France and rejoined his unit on the 27th of July 1917. And he remained at the French front until the 29th of March 1918, on the night of which, while preparing to move to the forward trenches, he actually sustained a bullet wound to the foot. There's controversy in relation to that same wound. His commanding officer had given an order shortly before the shot rang out for all soldiers to actually clear their guns. And a few minutes after the order was issued, a single shot was hit, and John Kinane fell to the ground with, a bullet wound to the foot. His commanding officer said that he had no authority to have live ammunition at the time in his gun, and he actually recommended that on his return to the unit that he be court-martialed. However, John was actually evacuated to the 18th General Field Hospital on the 7th of April and embarked for England aboard the SS Princess Elizabeth on the 13th of April, where he was admitted to Reading War Hospital on the 15th. Now, John made a recovery from his wounds, and he was actually granted furlough from the 21st of May to the 4th of June 1918. During this leave, he actually travelled to Ireland, presumably to meet his father's family in Upperchurch. And while in Ireland, he contracted the scourge at the time, the dreaded Spanish flu. And with the result, he was too ill to report back for duty at the end of his furlough on the 4th of June. John's condition deteriorated, and he was admitted to King George V Hospital in Dublin on the 15th of June in a condition described as dangerously ill. Bear with me a moment. At 9:20 a.m. on that date, a telegram was sent from the Royal Hospital in Dublin to the administration headquarters of the Australian Australian Imperial Forces, and the telegram simply stated, to administrative headquarters, AIF, London. Regret to inform you, number 2225, Private Kinane, John, 45th AIF, died in this hospital at 1:45 a.m. today, cause of death pneumonia. Nearest relations in the UK, James Cahill, Holy Cross, Thurles, County Tipperary. Relationship, first cousin. He is desirous, if allowed, to take the remains to be buried in Glenkeen Cemetery near Borrisalee. If this is approved, funeral will take place 12 noon Saturday next, 22nd. Is it admissible to issue Army Form W3084 it has been pointed to the nearest relative that the only expenses allowed will be £5 in accordance with EU 1434 of 1918. Commander, King George V Hospital, Dublin. Simple, short and sweet. Just referencing the death of a man, I say, many miles from his parents' home. Now you can only imagine the grief of that family when they received the subsequent telegram in Australia. And that I think has repercussions within our story. As I said in the telegram, his first cousin James Cahill sought and was granted permission to have John buried here in Glenkeen. And as a footnote, in 2005, a young student, Sarah Zachariah, was walking on the shore of Lake Beak near Colac. As he kicked the sand, he noticed a blackened circular object buried in the same sand. He picked up the object and took it home with him. And after he cleaned it up, he realised that it was a World War I service medal bearing the inscription 2225, Private J. Cunahan, 4534 AIF. He managed to contact the Cunahan family and return the medal to them. But you can actually just remember, would say, possibly the anguish of that family months after the death of their son, to receive in the post a citation and a medal. And would say a distraught father probably thinking that what good was this medal, would say following the death of his son. And he walking down to the lake and just throwing that medal in disgust into the water, and it just washing up some months later to lie buried all those years in the sand, waiting to be discovered. I don't know if many people from Australia have actually visited John Cunahan's grave, but it lies here today, we say blooming with bluebells. John Cunahan is only one of the soldiers from World War I, we'll say, with connections into the Borrisoleigh area that we like to remember, we say, on this day. John Kent was a native of Borrisoleigh, born 13th of January 1889 to William and Ellen Kent, was Nee Connolly of Lower Street, Borrisoleigh. He was the youngest of 3 children, having an older brother, William, and a sister, Mary. His father was a cattle drover, and his mother, who hailed from County Cork, was described as a general servant. Between the 15th of January 1910 and 4th of July 1911, John Kent joined the Prince of Wales Leinster Regiment at Crinkle Barracks near Borough. He was stationed in India prior to the outbreak of World War I. And on 16th of October 1914, his regiment embarked on board ship at Bombay for Plymouth, where they arrived 1 month later. He embarked for France on the 19th of December, but John Kent's war came to an end on Valentine's Day, the 14th of February 1915, on the front line at the Belgian town of Dieckboep. And unfortunately, his body was never recovered. He's simply listed as no known grave. And he's commemorated on panel 44 of the Men in Gate Memorial. Another young man, Patrick Dewan, was born on the 16th of March 1895 in Borrisoleigh, County Tipperary. His parents were Frank and Mary Dewan, nee Keating, and they resided at Main Street, Borrisoleigh. His father, Frank, was a carpenter, and the family left Borrisoleigh to move to Pike Street in Thurles around 1914. At some stage during World War I, Patrick enlisted in the 2nd Battalion, Royal Dublin Fusiliers. He was given a regimental number of 21859, and he had the rank of private. For some reason, he joined under the alias of John Dunn and gave his next of kin as Frank and Mary Dunn, Pike Street, Thurles. He was deployed to France and died on the 21st of March 1918 during a German attack near the town of Ronzay. Patrick, again, has no known grave, but is commemorated in the Pozier Memorial, panel 7980, under his alias, John Dunn. His family knew nothing until a telegram was delivered saying that John Dunn had left his entire possessions to Mary Dewan. The details were enough for them to realise that John Dunn was indeed actually their son. And his name is inscribed here on the Dewan family headstone, number 221 in the actual map, and it's just over here, under his actual name of Patrick Dewan. Another soldier, Frederick Denny, who according to the 1901 census lived at 9 Palace Street, Borrisoleigh, along with his mother and 2 sisters. His mother is described as a widow of Sub-Constable Ernest Claude Denny, and they were residing with her mother and 2 brothers. By 1909, the family had moved to Crostisi, near Norwich in England, and it was in Norwich that Frederick joined the Hampshire Regiment. His regiment landed in France on the 23rd of August 1914 as part of the British Expeditionary Force, and Freddie managed to survive for 3.5 years of the 4 years of World War I, when he met his death at Arras during heavy fighting on the 28th of March 1918. Yet another soldier, and interred in no known grave, and remembered on the Arras Memorial, Bay number 6. Again, another man from Borrisoleigh, Martin Hackett, born on the 5th of April 1898 at Johns Lane, Nina, County Tipperary. He was the eldest son of John Hackett and his wife Mary ní Tuath of Curragreig, Borrisoleigh. Mary Hackett, in keeping with tradition at the time, had returned to her own home for the birth of her first child. At some point following his 17th birthday, in April of 1915, Martin Hackett travelled the 5.5 miles to Richmond Barracks in Templemore, and there he enlisted in the Royal Munster Fusiliers. He was aged 18 when he died on Monday, August the 21st, 1916, again buried in no known grave, but remembered on panel 16C of the Thiepval Memorial. Yet another Borrisoleigh man, Louis Ryan of Course Park, Borrisoleigh, whose father is buried just at the top of the hill on the far side of the ruins. The father and uncle are actually buried there. He was born in Borrisoleigh in 1888 and was the eldest son in Thomas Ryan Luce's, that is, second family. His mother was Winifred Barry of Roisin. Louis Ryan emigrated to the United States in 1912 at the age of 24. When America entered the Great War, he was drafted into the American Army, receiving his draft papers on the 10th of October 1917, and he was attached to the 305th Infantry Regiment of the 77th Division, which was from New York and known colloquially as the Metropolitan Division. Louis joined F Company of the 305th Infantry Regiment, and an advance party of the regiment arrived in France on the 13th of April 1918. The main body left Camp Upton, Long Island, on Monday the 15th of April to travel to France by way of Liverpool and Dover, arriving Calais on the 30th of April. Louis was killed during one of the final engagements of World War I at the during the Meuse-Argonne campaign in early October 1918, 5 weeks before the armistice. On the 3rd of October, F Company gained a foothold beneath a German strongpoint known popularly as Suicide Hill. A well-fortified machine gun emplacement dominated the slopes of the hill and had inflicted heavy casualties during the previous attempts at taking it. At 1500 hours on that day, Louis led a party of men on a reconnaissance of the German position, a mission he failed to return from. When the machine gun post was finally captured, 4 days later, Louis's body was found a few yards from the gun emplacement. He had died of stomach wounds evidently received in an attempt to take the position. He is buried in Meuse-Argonne Cemetery near Romain in eastern France. The cemetery is the largest American cemetery in France from World War I, and Louis's grave reference is Plot H, row 23, grave number 34. He was one of 2,110 men of the Metropolitan Division who died during the 8 months in France. Now, we often wonder what kind of relationship actually existed between, we'll say, recruits in the British Army, men that were seen effectively to take the King's Shilling, and Irish volunteers at the time. It was very much, I have to tell you, similar to the relationship that existed immediately after the Civil War between a lot of the people that fought on opposite sides. They recognised each other as brothers in arms. They recognised each other as neighbours and friends. And one Irish volunteer whose letters have survived was a man by the name of Tom Burke. Now, Tom was a teacher, school teacher in Eileen National School, and he resided at Chapel Street in Borrisoleigh. And he had a brother, Michael, in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Tom used to write regularly to his brother, but he wasn't long doing so when he realised that his letters were actually being intercepted. So Tom Burke actually decided that he was going to play games with the people that were intercepting his letters. And the letters that were meant for his brother, he had them posted secretly in Nina and Thurles. But the letters that he wanted to use to actually rile the Royal Irish Constabulary and the authorities, he posted in Borrisoleigh, where they were intercepted by the police and made their way to Dublin, and they're preserved in the British Archives in Kew. And Tom was less than kind in his remarks about the pedigree of RIC men and we'll say their agents in Ireland. He described them as the sweepings of the street, the inmates of jails, the issue of women of ill repute, etc., etc., all designed to get people hot under the collars that were reading these letters. But one of the letters that was a genuine letter, and which he did write to his brother, and we'll say the wording of, it gives us an insight into, we'll say, one of the Irish volunteers' regard for some of the men that were serving in France. And he actually states, it's strange what can proceed over here. Jack Ryan, Bula, is laid up, wounded in the knee at least. He had great fortune since the war started to say he did not receive a single scratch until now. Jack the Bull Tracy is seriously wounded, and Dr. Frank Power is missing since the 21st of March. No account of him at all. Merton Connors, John's grandfather actually, he said, was also reported missing, but thankfully he has now got through. In other words, Merton Connors must have gone missing, was it, during an engagement with the enemy, got trapped in no man's land, but eventually managed to make it back to the British lines. Dan Maher was laid to rest a week ago. He's nearly the last of the old fogies. So from that, you can actually see that Tom Maher, I would say, who was an intensely proud volunteer, went out of his way to actually get up the noses of the British authorities, but still, these men were his friends and neighbours, and he had high regard for them.
There's several other British soldiers buried here too, and I'm going to talk about three of them in particular. I'll talk about them briefly. And there's a man from the townland, a Mayo man from the townland of Corry-Kilburn, near Mayo Abbey, buried here, and his name is Thomas Vahey, Thomas Vahey. And how did Thomas Vahey come to be buried in Glenkean? So, Vahey, he joined the Grenadier Guards on the 17th of January 1899. He was sworn in as Ashton under Line and lost the regiment number 7859. His age was given as 19 years and 11 months, and his trade has been that of a labourer. And his service saw him posted to Africa, where he fought in the Boer War. On the outbreak of World War I, he was called from the reserve and posted to France, and while there he was to suffer the horrors of gas and shell shock, he was discharged from the army on the 7th of June 1915. And the entry in his service record accruedly states, discharged, having been found no longer physically fit for service. In due course he was to marry Mary Murphy from Fairness in County Wexford, and they came to Borrisoleigh sometime in the early 20s. And remember my father used to talk about it, and he made out that they kept it part of a travelling show. Now, Thomas Vahey, he died in hospital in Connell in 1931 and he suffered from tuberculosis and died 6 months. And his widow Mary, she lived on for 10 years after. And she buried in New Cemetery. Her son Michael and the family are buried there. Now, for me it's important to mention Thomas Fahey, because to me he represents a generous cohort of people, you know, and to me it reflects a much larger picture at the time. And Winston Churchill, he eloquently proclaimed about veterans returning home to a land fit for heroes, but the reality proved to be such, and it's anything but such a case. And many soldiers returned home to both England and Ireland, where massive post-war inflation created abject poverty. Men, broken in health, physically and mentally, were left to deal with life's problems and challenges alone and unaided. And that would be the story of many of these people who fought in the First World War. They became forgotten. Another man I thought about was a man called Michael McNamara. He's buried up there, just at the brow of the hill there. And Michael McNamara, he first joined the British Army on the 4th of November 1893 at Templemore. And his army career was short on that occasion. It only lasted 2 days, because his under-chest measurement wasn't where it should have been, and he was discharged as being of inferior physical physique. However, something must have happened. He must have went to the gym or something, because on the 18th of February 1915, McNamara enlisted in the British Army in Clonmel. The 35-year-old married man, he was described his trade as that of a groom, and he had served 3 years previously the Royal Field Artillery Militia. And he was married to Johanna Gusber for Torres, and he was the father of 2 sons, James and Michael. Canon McNamara was in Templemore would be a grandson of his. He served for a particular time in France, mostly with the medical corps and with the labour corps. And those were no jobs either, you know, taking wounded from no man's land and bringing to field hospitals and erecting telecommunication lines and all of those kind of things. The question I suppose you'd ask is, was it in answer to John Renton's speech at Woodbridge, or concern for the plight of small nations that prompted McNamara to leave his wife and 2 young sons and engage in the horrors of warfare in France and Belgium? And of course it wasn't. McNamara found himself in a